Good evening and welcome to the council meeting. It is with great sadness that we open this meeting with a minute's silence in honour of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and a minute's silence for two former members, Anne Williams, leader of the council and former civic mayor of Torbay, and Jean Cope, former councillor, who both passed away last month. Our thoughts and prayers are with members of the royal family, along with the family, friends and colleagues of both Anne and Jean at this sad time. I now invite the Chief Executive to lead the minute's silence in their memory. This will be followed by my chaplain's prayer, allowing time for personal reflection before we commence.
Members, I now request the Council to observe a minute's silence in respect of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Anne Williams and Jean Cope. Thank you, members.
Would my chaplain, Tim, please now lead us in prayer?
Thank you. One of the striking things about Queen Elizabeth was how often she spoke about her own Christian faith and how she sought to follow the example of Jesus. Jesus talks in the Gospels about how he has come to serve. Perhaps this is best exemplified when he washes his disciples' feet. And after he has done that, this was quite an amazing thing that Jesus did. He says this to his followers. He says, "Do you understand what I have done for you? I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Let's pray together. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for every good memory we will have of our Queen. And we thank you for how she sought to follow your example, Lord Jesus. We thank you for her life of service, how the vow she made as a 21-year-old, she kept to for so many years. And as she sought to follow the example of the Lord Jesus, so we ask that you would help us to do likewise and to consider others ahead of ourselves, to consider others in the way that we speak and think and act. We thank you and ask for your help this evening. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
please be seated. And gentlemen, ladies and officers, please feel free to remove your jackets as it's quite warm. I will now ask the Chief Executive to outline the procedure for today's meeting.
Of course, Madam Mayor. Members, you're aware that when speaking, please ensure that your microphones are turned on, and if you wish to leave the meeting before it's finished, then please give your apologies via the Head of Governance Support. As always, we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel, and the proceedings of the Council meeting will also be recorded. For those in the room, please refrain from watching the live stream as it can cause interference for our viewers. In terms of housekeeping, we're not expecting any fire alarm testing today, and in the event of an evacuation, there will be a recorded message requesting that we evacuate the building. We'll need to leave via the closest exit and assemble in the Lifestyle Members car park opposite the main entrance. Please also ensure, members, that your mobile phone and iPads are turned to silent. Madam Mayor.
I move to apologies. Do we have any apologies for today's meeting?
We do, Madam Mayor. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Barmby, Councillor Bye, Councillor Manning, Councillor Morey, Councillor O'Dwyer and Councillor Sykes. Councillor Darling, do we have apologies from Councillor Dart, Councillor Dudley?
If I can tender those, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
I move to item 3, tribute to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Before I discuss, I will say, we come together this evening following the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Our sadness is shared by people across the globe, as with affection, gratitude, we remember the lifetime of service given by our longest serving monarch. The basis on which our monarchy is built has ensured that through the centuries, the crown has passed in an unbroken line of succession. Our meeting this evening is to remember Her Majesty and show appreciation on behalf of the people of Torbay. And I would like to take a moment at this point to pass my words on of my feelings about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was a marvellous woman who gave a whole lifetime of service to this country, the Commonwealth and the world. She was long-standing and certainly a constant in my life. I remember the Silver Jubilee in 1977, being a young girl and seeing all the pageantry then and feeling how wonderful it was. She was selfless. She gave courage to people, and that is something that we and people across the world will always remember and thank her for. I personally met the Queen on one occasion at a garden party. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of people making you stand in the right place, do the right thing, but actually when the Queen came along and she stopped and spoke, you felt like it was a one-to-one experience. She actually touched Todd, my first guide dog, so we therefore called him Sir Todd. And she was really interested in guide dogs, and actually, fortunately, she had visited the guide dog centre at Exeter just the week before. So it was lovely to hear how her visit had gone on there. She was truly a remarkable woman, and I'm sure she would miss very much. We do wish King Charles every success, and I'm sure he will follow in his mother's footsteps. I now therefore propose that, on behalf of people of Torbay, the Council's appreciation and remembrance for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and wishes to King Charles III for a successful reign be placed on record. Councillor Brown, I believe you're going to second the motion.
I second it, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I will then follow up with last week. Last Thursday, we received the deeply and sad news of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth's death. Much has already been written, much has already been seen on the press and the broadcast and national and global media about Her Majesty and her truly remarkable reign. As members of the Royal Navy family, many of us were privileged to have presence, energy, wisdom, and the example she set us all. With her humanity, Arno and the RNOC were hugely honoured by the long and positive patronage we have been fortunate to enjoy to date. We offer our sincere condolence to Her Majesty the King, the rest of the royal family. Honorary Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I now invite debate as the opportunity for members to show their appreciation to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. I would like to use my discretion to invite each of the group leaders to speak first. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And much has been spoken about Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth II. She's been described as a constant, a rock and an anchor. She has been throughout all of our lives. There's a couple of elements of our world I'd like to reflect on with colleagues this afternoon. And when one considers the long reign of our monarch, when we were still had empire, and now she's changed that empire over time into a commonwealth that celebrates diversity around the world, is something to be applauded and welcomed massively, because it is through that diversity that we gain strength. And I would like to draw attention to members of that outstanding achievement of how the United Kingdom has moved over those 70 years. I would also like to reflect on what we saw in the tributes, and particularly in King Charles III visiting Northern Ireland, and how both sides of that community held our monarch in love and affection and felt that she had valued them when she had visited during the times of the Troubles, and how that had helped draw those troubled communities together. So I think that holding that up to the light is extremely important. I strangely enough was with Councillor Mandy Darling at the time when we visited Buckingham Palace, and Todd was duly stroked by the Queen, and she didn't mention that Torbay Hospital printed out a name tag for him that named him as Sir Todd, which was rather fun to have after that visit. But I would like to reflect to colleagues that in being in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II, you really did feel that you were the centre of the universe, and that is a true gift that she was able to bear, whether she was meeting folk like yourself or myself, or whether that was with statesmen throughout the world. So I would welcome this vote of thanks to our Royal Majesty, and also to our new King, King Charles III. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Darling. Councillor Loxton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On behalf of the Independent Group, I would like to thank you, Your Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, for dedicating your life to us. You reigned over us long and continuously for 7 decades. We thank you. Your Majesty worked hard every day throughout her reign, visiting all parts of the world, including our very own Torbay. She met her future husband at Dartmouth Naval College, that's just down the road from our English Riviera. And in May 1956, the Queen attended Torquay Town Hall with her beloved husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. They both attended a garden party at Tor Abbey, which is over there. And then in July 1969, she reviewed our magnificent fleet of 39 ships anchored in Torbay. She viewed them from the Royal Yacht Britannia. I personally remember seeing this fantastic event with my family as if it was only yesterday. It really was tremendous. In 1977, she visited Torbay as part of her Jubilee celebrations, and I'm sure she was given a cream tea. That is jam, not marmalade. Latterly, in 2022 celebrations, she enjoyed the sharing of marmalade sandwiches with Paddington Bear. In 2012, Her Majesty contributed in winning the London Olympics bid. She was at that time able to show the world her parachuting skills. She was loved by young and old. We grieve her passing with the nation. May flights of angels singly to thy rest. Thank you, Your Majesty, we thank you. And importantly, we offer our deep condolences to His Majesty King Charles III and Her Majesty the Queen Consort, and of course the royal family. Our good wishes go to them for the future as they undertake their new roles. God save the King.
Thank you, Councillor Loxton. Councillor David Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The passing of our Queen, where shall I start? Many great words have already been said about our Queen, whether that be locally, nationally or internationally. However, our Queen was a lady who epitomised service above self. A lady who vowed to serve this country for every year that God gave her, whether her life be long or short. And she fulfilled that promise right until the very end. It was only hours before her death that she fulfilled her final duty, asking the new Prime Minister to form a government in her name. I never had the pleasure of meeting the Queen personally. However, yesterday I did have the great honour and privilege to be invited to pay my respects to Her Majesty at Westminster Hall. So for a few moments, I just wish to share my feelings with you about what that meant to me yesterday. My day started out in Hyde Park to view the ceremony on the large screen. Once I arrived there, it became obvious that there were in fact 4 huge screens with a very impressive PA system dedicated to each screen. The screens and the sound were crystal clear. I stood and looked around me. Some screens were already full of people. Mine seemed to be about half full. The build-up and yesterday's ceremony was played out on the big screens. The crowd was a real mixed age group. Many young people were there, most of them wearing something black as a sign of respect. At 2:22, the cannons roared from behind my position, and the procession started. The atmosphere was like something I have never experienced before. Everyone knew that they were playing a part of making history in the making. The volume from the PA was loud. Every beat of the muffled bass drum seemed to push through your chest. The toll of Big Ben every minute seemed to resonate across the space. People sat in silence and watched. And then, as the coffin arrived at Westminster, everyone almost instinctively stood up, as if to pay their own private respect to the Queen. It was not orchestrated. There was no programme of what to do. There was no cohesion. It was just the right thing to do. The outside space was silent, and everyone intently listening to the choir at Westminster Hall. It was then on for me onto Westminster Hall to pay my own respects to our Queen, lying in state, that lying in state ceremony. I arrived in the Great Hall at just after 9 p.m. And although I have been in Westminster Hall on a number of occasions previously, I was surprised last night at how small the staircase seemed to be. Remembering the choir on the screen just a few hours earlier, that space had looked so large, but now stood at the top of the steps, looking down at the coffin. That space felt very small. The whole area was carpeted, and for the second time in my day, my overwhelming memory was of complete silence. Not a word, not a shuffle, not a movement, no rustle, nothing at all. Just complete silence. I slowly made my way down the steps to pay my final respects to a great lady. Approximately halfway down, the line was stopped. It was time to change the guard. We stood in silence. This was broken by the officer in charge, stamping his sword on the stone floor twice to indicate to the current guard that the change was underway. As we have all seen, this process was undertaken with the usual military precision that we have all witnessed over this preceding week. The guard having changed, it was my turn to walk down those final steps and be in line with that great spectacle in front of me. I bowed my head. I had my own personal thoughts as I paid my final respects to a Queen who has served her country and Commonwealth for 70 glorious years. A Queen who has been, and I would imagine will remain, to be our longest serving monarch ever. An opportunity to simply say goodbye to the only monarch I have never ever known in my life. An opportunity to be part of that history in the making. A day that I will never forget, and memories that will live with me till my final days. God bless.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Okay, open the debate. I now open the debate. Do we have a call? Councillor Emile. Councillor Emile.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members, ladies and gentlemen. My heartfelt sympathy, prayers and deepest condolences are with the royal family. Torbay joins the nation in mourning the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Serving for 70 years, she was the longest reigning British monarch and the longest serving female head of state in world history. For over 7 decades, she fulfilled the pledge she made that her whole life, whether it be long or short, would be devoted to the service of us all. Our Queen certainly carried out that promise. Her reign was exceptional, and we remember her today with love
and thanks. As Torbay's Armed Forces champion, I would like to reflect a little, please, this evening on our Queen's close association with the armed forces during her reign. As our monarch, she dedicated her life to the country, to serving this nation and the Commonwealth, with unwavering support to all of our armed forces. Her devotion to duty became a symbol that inspired billions of people across the world. The Queen was the only female member of the royal family to enter the armed forces, and until her death, the last surviving head of state who served in the Second World War. As sovereign, the Queen held the position of Commander-in-Chief of numerous regiments in the United Kingdom and throughout the Commonwealth. This close relationship with the armed forces continued throughout her life through regular visits to service establishments and Her Majesty's naval ships. She was always passionate about our military forces and so looked on pride with the serving personnel, particularly those based in our own county, and a deep affection with the Britannia Royal Naval College. The Queen's relationship with the armed forces began when, as Princess Elizabeth, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the ATS, as a full-time member in 1945. She held many military appointments and honorary ranks and spent much time meeting servicemen and servicewomen and their families, both at home and on overseas trips. The Queen also introduced the Elizabeth Cross in 2009 to give special recognition to the families of those who died on military operations or as a result of terrorism. It is indeed poignant today, on the 15th of September, that it is the 82nd anniversary and commemoration of the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Day. During that battle in 1940, there were thousands of acts of heroism, not only by those in uniform, but also many civilians who found themselves on the front line. Indeed, I attended a service myself this morning at the Paignton War Memorial, representing the Royal British Legion with the Royal Air Forces Association. The Queen's attitude to service and work was exemplified by the "keep calm and carry on" motto that saw the country through those dark days of the Second World War. So like myself, I know many of you, indeed as you have said this evening, will have your own special reflections and memories of Her Majesty the Queen, who visited Torbay on 4 times during her reign. Reflecting on my own personal experiences in Torbay, I was honoured to have met Queen Elizabeth on 2 such occasions. In a former role, I had the responsibility of organising royal visits along with the Lord Lieutenant's office. And indeed, I was present in August 1977, the Queen's Silver Jubilee year, and I met the Queen during her Silver Jubilee visit to Torquay, just next door at Tor Abbey, with the then Mayor, the late Sidney Peck. And again, in July 1988, Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh visited Torquay and Brixham for the tercentenary, which is the 300th anniversary of the landing of William of Orange, Prince William of Orange. We had a week of great celebrations, and on 2 of the days, which was the 20th of July and the 21st of July in 1988, Her Majesty came to arrive by rail. She came to Torquay railway station, she went to Torquay Harbour, she went to Holden Pier, she came back to Torquay, she went on board, they had the Britannia, the Royal Yacht Britannia anchored in the bay, where they watched the racing between the British and the Dutch sailing clubs. There was a complete week of Anglo-Dutch events, and on the 20th of July 1988, I actually was presented to the Queen in this very room in 1988, where she asked me if I had enjoyed organising the visit, and I just remember her smile lit up the room. She was so gracious. I was truly honoured to be presented to her by the then Dennis Reed, who was the then Mayor of Torbay. So for me, I was involved in the Silver Jubilee, and it gave me an enormous, which was 1977, enormous pleasure here in 2002 that I was involved as the member champion for the Queen's Platinum celebrations. So to end my thoughts and reflections, I would like to end with this quote. As Paddington says in a lovely, quirky and touching tribute to a remarkable woman, thank you, Ma'am, for everything. God bless you, Your Majesty. And to now a new era has started with the King Charles III. God save the King.
Thank you, Councillor Mill. Councillor John Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first met the Queen when she was Princess Elizabeth. It was 6 years after the end of the Second World War, when as a 12-year-old schoolboy, I was taken with the school to London to see the Festival of Britain. This was an event which showed the world that Britain had recovered or was recovering from the war. Princess Elizabeth came into one of the rooms, and my class of boys was there, mischievously of course, and we met the Princess Elizabeth, and amazingly she chose me to speak to. That was a privilege, an absolute privilege, and I've never forgotten that. A little later, I was watching the coronation a couple of years later, on a 9-inch black and white television set in a Bakelite box with the family all around it. And it was an amazing feat to see that coronation. Now we look at it on television and it's sometimes in colour. Then in the mid-1970s, again, I have been so privileged in my life, and I realise that. I was managing director of Lister Diesel Engines, for making diesel engines for the agricultural industry. And we had a stand at the Stonebridge Agricultural Show in Warwickshire. And she came onto the stand. We knew beforehand that this was coming, but the equity came over to me and took me aside and said, when Her Gracious Majesty turns up, do not speak until you are spoken to. Do not put out your hand until she does. And if she does put out in her hands, please don't squeeze, because she has many, many, many hands squeezing hers. She was not ashamed, I have to say, during her reign, to express her faith in God. Moving on, I found myself as managing director of Rolls-Royce diesel engines, and when the Gulf War occurred, Her Majesty the Queen came to the factory in Shrewsbury, and again for the third time I had the privilege of seeing her, meeting to her and speaking to her. It was amazing because she always comes fully acquainted with what the people are doing that she was with, and she knew a lot about our product, which is a large diesel engine, which in today's money would cost getting on for £1 million each, for the Challenger main battle tank. And she came over to see the tank, which I have to say, if you've never seen it before, is a frightening hulk of metal. And she knew that the engine, the tank, could have the engine changed in 23 minutes in desert conditions. She knew that the value of the engine was around about £500,000 then, but it's getting on for £1 million now. And she realised that the mileage usage of the tank is, and take notice of this, ladies and gentlemen, 2 gallons per mile. 2 gallons per mile. And we had to send our people to the Gulf because the army hadn't got enough engineers. And she knew that, and that was why she came to see us in Shrewsbury to say thank you to 1,800 workers. 1,800 workers who saw the Queen. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, she knew basically what was going on in the engines, and basically moving on, I have seen, as I've just said, the Queen on 3 times, but interestingly, I've also, the funeral that happened last night on the horse-drawn carriage, I've seen that in my lifetime 3 times. Prince George VI, Winston Churchill, and now Her Gracious Majesty the Queen. And we all know that the military precision of that yesterday was mind-blowing. So basically, I have to say this, I have been blessed in my life in seeing her. I say this, she has served us wonderfully. It makes us all proud to be British, and I certainly pray to God that she rests in eternal peace and be bathed in perpetual light. Mandatum est. May I say, God save the Queen.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Swithin-Long, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to yourself, the Chief Executive, and the other 3 group leaders for agreeing to keep included in the minute's silence this evening former councillors Anne Williams and Jean Cope. I sense that public service will be a theme of tonight's proceedings, and the service of those 2 former councillors very much lived up to that. I never met Anne Williams, but know that from what others have said that she was very much a public servant. I did, however, know Jean Cope much better. She was a councillor for Cockington with Chelston, and was interested in public affairs beyond her being a councillor. And her public service also included working for the NHS. So thank you very much for keeping those included as well. As Councillor David Thomas mentioned this evening, we are living through a historical moment. I am 50, and last Sunday's proclamation in Torbay was the first that I have ever witnessed. And the fact that there has been so long a period before King Charles's proclamation is a testament in itself to Queen Elizabeth's reign. I was at this point going to make a feeble joke about Councillor Mooring having an advantage over us, as he is bound to be, as he's so old, of having seen more proclamations than we have. But as he's not here, that's rather stolen my thunder. However, I do have a small confession to make. In the past, I have struggled with the idea of a hereditary monarchy, and have even expressed views similar to those expressed by the new Prime Minister when she was younger. However, like many, the Queen's sense of duty and public service won me over many years ago, and like many who were sceptical, have been won over as well. I've also come to realise that the vast majority of residents in Torbay in the UK really value the royal family and their representatives, such as yourself, Madam Mayor, who take an interest in their lives, charities, community works or businesses, and asking, what do you do? And we saw that respect for the monarchy during the Jubilee earlier this year, and by the visit by the then Prince Charles to Cockington. Her Majesty also had a great sense of humour and kept up with the times. And if people have a moment later on tonight, it might be worth using your search engine of choice and just putting in the words Her Majesty the Queen, Prince Harry, and the word boom. And there's a hilarious sketch of them and President Obama, which is a joy to watch, and it rivals the Paddington Bear sketch. And it's a good example of how she progressed with the times, used technology, and had a good sense of humour. And Madam Mayor, it would be an honour to support your motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. David and I were so honoured to be invited to the Queen's Garden Party back in May earlier this year. The Queen herself was not in attendance on that day, but Prince William, Catherine, Prince Edward and Sophie were there. The whole occasion is something we will never forget, from choosing our outfits to entering the large gates at the foot of the palace lined with the beefeaters and guards. As we walked through the palace grounds, the manicured gardens played host to the most perfect day. There were 2 bands who played alternatively throughout the afternoon. We all waited in anticipation and excitement for the royals to walk through the guests as we took as many pictures as we could. The afternoon teas were served in large marquees and everything was so quintessentially English. We felt so privileged to be at Buckingham Palace in the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, celebrating 70 years on the throne. Little did we know at that time that a few months later we would be mourning the Queen's passing. The Queen was our guiding light, who devoted her whole life to the people of the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and those around the globe. Her sense of duty and service met no bounds, and we are all going to miss her. It's now time for Her Majesty to rest, but we all owe you so much gratitude. It just leaves me to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Chris Lewis.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. An honour to speak in this debate on Her Majesty the Queen. The Queen came to the throne in February 1952, not long after Christopher Nigel Pearson Lewis was born in March 1952, about 3 weeks later. 70 years we've been together, the Queen and I. In that time, the Queen has seen many councillors come and go, many members of Parliament come and go, and indeed many Prime Ministers come and go, 14 of them. But she has always been with us. What are my memories of the Queen? Well, I first came close to the Queen when the opening of Parliament. I was very lucky to have a seat in the Royal Gallery, which is the long room as they all come through going to the House of Lords. And the monarch walks down with her robes and her hat, called the crown. And I looked at the Queen and I saw those robes and the crown, and she gave me a big smile, and I think it was a wink. But I turned round and saw there were 200 people behind me. And as the darling said, you know, she lit up that room and you thought that smile was specially for you. The other occasion I was close to the Queen was when my father was knighted in 1982 at Buckingham Palace. And I was in the audience, and it didn't matter whether someone was getting the MB, a knighted, whatever. You could see by the Queen that she was interested in what they had done and what they had achieved. She made them feel important. And after my father was knighted where the sword goes on his shoulder, they had a brief chat. And after it, I said to my father, "What did the Queen say?" And he said, "That's top secret. That's between me and the Queen." And in those days, that was very true. I did say to him, maybe because you represented in Parliament the smallest county in England, Rutland, but he wouldn't give anything away. Those were formal occasions. My parents lived near Stamford, and at Stamford, Burghley Horse Trials. And every year, the Queen, Princess Margaret, and the royal family would turn up. This is before we had the security in the 60s. And they would turn up in not the Range Rovers, but the Jeeps, you know, the green ones, sort of army Jeeps. And they would have their picnic, and they would wander around. And I did, in fact, speak to the Queen on some occasions, but not on a formal basis, but just that she was standing next to me, and they used to roam around. And of course, the Queen was delighted at the Burghley Horse Trials in 1971 when Princess Anne won the European Championship. So it's those off-duty occasions when you saw the Queen with a big smile on her face, relaxed, and dare I say it, being one of us. That's when you realise why the Queen was so special and loved by so many. May she rest in peace, and God save the King. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Hazel-Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When someone whom we love, someone we respect, someone we have admiration for passes on, we want to remember them with happy and thoughtful memories. My first memory of Her Majesty the Queen was when she came to Coventry to open the newly built Coventry Cathedral in 1962. During World War II, Coventry suffered heavy losses of life and also lost its dearly beloved cathedral in the Blitz. So, with such a large event, I was overjoyed to be one of the many brownies and guides who lined the roads with our flags at the ready and waving them as the car went past. There's the Queen. Oops, she's gone. But it meant so much to us all to be part of such a really, really important event as the opening of this new cathedral. Some years later, in the 1980s, the Queen was visiting Coventry again. The local paper had printed the route that her procession would be taking. She would be going past the bottom of the road where we lived. So, along with other residents and my two children, with our flags at the ready, we waited patiently on the route. We waited, and we waited, and we waited. The local paper had printed the wrong route. So the local vicar, who was also down on the road with his flag, wrote to the Queen to say how disappointed the residents had been to have missed her. He received a letter back to invite a small group of residents to an event in the Birmingham Town Hall later that year, where she would personally meet a few of the residents who had been out that day and had missed her. My then 10-year-old son was luckily picked to represent the local primary school-aged children from the area. So we really cherished the photo that was taken on that day in Birmingham of the Queen talking to my son. It was in the Birmingham Post. It was a very large picture. So it's memories like that, individual events. And it's been touched on so much here, how the Queen made whoever she spoke to feel really important. And to see her talking there to my son, it really, really was very personal and very much, my son really cherished it. But what really impressed me was that the Queen had actually not only read the vicar's letter, but had also made these arrangements for her to meet those residents who had been disappointed. And to me, that was something throughout her reign she always showed when meeting people that she always had time to listen, to say a few words, was never hurried, always made whoever she was talking to feel important. Her role as the Queen always came first. Her life was that role of being our Queen, and that role as our Queen was her whole life. May the memories of her reign live with us all forever. And thank you, Ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Lee Harrogate.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would just add to the comments already made about what an honour it is to speak in this particular meeting. And I'd also like to put on record my personal feelings, as well as those of my constituents, in offering incalculable thanks for a life of service, integrity and honour. I was at work at school and it was lunchtime when I heard the news that the Queen was likely in her final hours. And I think it was a moment that for all of us, when we first heard that news, that felt like it had stopped all the clocks, that time had stood still, and there was a disorientating feeling of reality having taken a shift and a turn. I think we all recognised it as soon as we heard. And I can really remember my journey home, where it was somewhat dreamlike, and I'm not afraid to say that there were more than a few tears in my eyes. And although it felt very unreal and strange, at the same time there was something slightly familiar. And then I recognised what it was. It was another car journey where I'd gone north, this time back to the city of my birth, Leeds, where my grandmother had died. And again, that same strange feeling of a constant presence gone from our lives after a very long and very decent life. And I think the connection that occurred to me over those days will be reflected in many of the thoughts of many other people, including some people who I've seen on television standing in that queue to pay their respects in Westminster. I think the Queen's particular genius was to create that sense of both the majestic but also the familial. She felt like a presence to all of us, not as some kind of constant star, but almost like a grandmother, a great-grandmother, somebody who was connected to us in a very visceral sense as part of our family. I think that is her genius. I think she built this feeling with us over time, and she took some difficult and what would have been very awkward decisions for the one-time imperial princess. She allowed television into the coronation, at first reluctantly, and then opened up more and more aspects of her and the royal family's lives. I'm sure that many of those decisions that she took, step by step, year by year, often felt very alien, strange and uncomfortable for her. But in sharing her life, not least in things that have become so familiar to all of us, like the Christmas speeches, which become part of the fabric of who we are in the most simple and personal way. I'm sure that when she did that, every time there was a struggle, a balance between the person and the office, between her own personal comforts and the duty she felt to the state. And I think we all recognise that every single time the balance for her always lay in service to the country. So I think it was something she built up over time that was well crafted, skillful and very emotional in terms of its connection that it made with us over so many years. If I might also add one aspect of her life that I don't think anyone's touched upon, and it relates to my connection to the Queen, which is not the same as many of the other connections that people have made here. I never had the great honour of meeting and speaking to the Queen. She was somebody I saw from afar in the 1977 Silver Jubilee as a child. She was somebody I witnessed whizzing by when I was a student, where there was a motorcade went by, and I actually made the quip to a friend of mine crossing Magdalen Bridge. Who on earth does that person think they are? Or words to that effect. The Queen. And as I looked round, I could see her face in the window, almost smiling by. And if she heard my slightly irreverent remark, she at least didn't look offended. But my connection was to have the great honour to serve the Crown for a brief period of years, but it meant an enormous amount to me. And I recognised the Queen as perhaps the most peerless of diplomats and the best asset that this country's had in terms of its soft power in the last 70 years. One small example stands out to me. It was when she visited Dublin Castle in 2011 and took the very simple step of opening her speech with a few words in Irish. It literally took the breath away of the Irish nationalist politicians in the room. They could not believe what the Queen was doing. They understood the symbolism of it, and it was a huge moment in healing a very deep and very unpleasant wound. She followed that up, I think, the very next day by laying a wreath at the Garden of Remembrance in Dublin. This is a place that's reserved, revered by the Irish as a memorial to the soldiers, as they would see it, of the IRA who fought for independence. The Queen not only went there, she laid a wreath and she bowed her head. In the words of the Irish Premier Michael Martin, this was a crucial step in the healing between Ireland and Britain and accelerated the normalisation of relations by a great many years. I'd like to conclude by just summing up what I think are her final qualities. I think she typified the very best of us. She was patriotic but not nationalistic, always dignified but never haughty, noble but ready to serve, and rooted in the very fabric of our society, no matter how humble or how low. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to speak and express my thanks for this incalculable life of service, integrity and honour.
Thank you, Councillor Howgate. As we have no more members wishing to speak, I would like to thank... Councillor Brooks, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologise. I thought there would be more members wishing to speak this evening. Your Majesty, you were the silver, gold, then platinum thread, that held our nation and Commonwealth together. You were a diamond whose lustre will endure. To those of the second Elizabethan age, all of us, you were the jewel in the crown. The Queen said of the Duke of Edinburgh that he had been her strength and stay. Your late Majesty, you were the country's strength and stay through many difficult times, a steady centre in an ever-altering world. Not a fixed point you moved, but you were there as a steady hub. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies go out to the whole royal family, including the cousins, nephew and niece, and all her ladies in waiting and close household members whose whole lives had been dedicated and close to Her Majesty. Their sadness must be very great at this time. My own personal feelings have been of palpable sadness and grief. Forgive me, please. My mother, this may seem irrelevant, but my mother was born just a few days after Her Majesty the Queen. So I imagine my grandmother would point out to her how well behaved the little Princess Elizabeth and Margaret Rose always were and how well turned out. And I know my mother used to take great care in her appearance, even from as a young child. But also there were other similarities and parallels with my mother and Her Majesty. She was born in London at the same time. My mother wasn't evacuated. She stayed at home with her dear parents. On VE Day, and was bombed as well. Her house was bombed and she saw all destruction around. She was there on VE Day outside Buckingham Palace saying, "We want the Queen, we want the King," I beg your pardon, the King. And who knows, she may have only been a few feet away from Her Majesty or the then Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret Rose. She also lost her dear father, who was very close to her, rather early. So, although this seems irrelevant, throughout my mother's life, and ours too, she has seemed to be a point of reference. I never had the privilege to meet Her Majesty the Queen, although I did see her the first time, I believe, when I was about 5, when my mother showed me how to curtsy when the Queen walked close past us at Royal Ascot to go to the enclosure. And then at other times along the Mall I saw her go past. And in 1777, outside Tor Abbey, I too saw her pass in her blue and white gown. I remember that. So I think the last time we saw her was along the Mall, and it's been teeming with rain, absolutely teeming. And you know, just as the Queen, moments before Her Majesty and the rest of the royal family came out, the sun shone and it was like a tropical day with steam rising from everybody's sodden clothes. It was magical. And no sooner had she gone back into Buckingham Palace, the clouds came back over. So that was my last time to actually see Her Majesty in the flesh. To mangle a few extracts from the Poet Laureate's floral tribute. You are the lily, whose brightness glows beyond the life and border of its bloom. Evening will come, however determined the late afternoon. Now a new Carolean era has dawned after that evening. We say, God bless her late gracious Majesty, and God save the King. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. May I say thank you, members, for all the heartfelt, touching tributes that have been paid to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II this evening. I am confident that we have reflected the feelings felt by the people of Torbay and how they may be grieving at present too. The Queen was a constant on our lives, and it is only in time that the sadness we may feel now will be replaced by happy memories of the fun times and the laughter that we can remember that she had. May we wish King Charles III every success in his reign. And I will now ask the Chief Executive to take the vote on this motion. Thank you.
Of course, Madam Mayor. Members, those in favour, please raise your hands. Madam Mayor, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, members, for your attendance this evening. Before I close the meeting, may I request that we all stand to sing the national anthem in support of our new King, Charles III.
Thank you, members. I now close the meeting.